Hello everybody, it's me, Riffraff Hornhelm, and I'm back again with another presentation from the Dwarven Vault, and today we have another monster review. Continuing on with our dragon reviews from the original monster manual, today, as we've moved up the Pantheon, we're to a very critical dragon, and that would be the Chromatic Dragon, or most commonly known as Tiamat. Yeah, the big badass Tiamat. Us dwarves don't like him, but honestly, how big of a problem can it be? And we're going to talk a bit about that in today's review. So this is the Chromatic Dragon, Tiamat, and they're very special. They do not inhabit the prime material plane. They live and reside and are the leader, the the dragon in charge of the outermost level of the Nine Hells. It looks after all the dragons on the evil side throughout the world, rarely coming out of its lair. 90% of the time it's in its lair. So it's a tough dragon to run into, but when you run into it, well, yes, it can be difficult. Tiamat, of course, is a very large dragon. It's 60 feet long, and it has 128 hit points. It's a 16 hit dice creature from an attack standpoint, but it's 128 hit points, and that's substantial. That definitely aligns with many of the deities and demigods that would come later with the Deities and Demigods book released by TSR, also during the days of 1E, if you will. So, Tiamat is a very interesting creature. Like I said, 90% of the time in its lair. It's 100% capable of speech, 100% chance of having spells, and it is 10% of the time only ever caught sleeping. That's pretty rare. And of course it has 6 attacks. 6 attacks. Well, you have to remember that it has 5 different heads. And you're saying 6 attacks. Well, we'll get to that in a second. But it has 5 different heads that represent the white, black, green, blue, and red dragons. And of course have the breath weapon capability for that specific dragon. The breath weapon is very helpful, though it can only be used once a day per head. Now, I also mentioned there were 6 attacks, but what's the 6th attack? Well, it also has a stinger on the tail that doesn't do very much damage, but does cause the recipient, if you're hit, to have to save versus poison. Now, are these smart? Yeah, they're genius level. That's pretty good, right? I think they're very competent, I guess, on that side of it. They don't use their claws. They're just too big to use their claws, but they get 6 attacks every round. And of course, those bite attacks, they have some oomph behind them. They do a fair amount of damage. And if they do the breath weapon, well, there's that as well. And we haven't even gotten to spells yet. Each of the dragon heads can cast spells. For instance, if it's a black dragon and they're 2 first level spells, 2 of them. And if they're the red dragon size, it's 5th level. And the rest of them are covered in between. That's an awful lot of spell capability, considering that each of those heads can cast a spell in the same round. So, wow, that's an awful lot of damage really quick, right? Well, yes. But, there's always a but. You only can use the breath weapons once a day. Yeah, there's 5 of them, but after that, well, you're left with a limited number of spells. And of course, the physical attacks that you could do as the dragon. Now, if you catch them in their lair, they will always have one adult dragon of each of the colors represented by its heads. So you'll have a white and a black and a green and a blue and a red, but they're only adult dragons. So we've spoken before about how dragons are split up into ages in the original monster manual. And there's 8 different ages. An adult dragon is at the 5th stage of life. So it's not an old or an ancient old, it's just a 5th level dragon. That's not so much to worry about as, for instance, by comparison to its counterpart, which is Bahamut, the platinum dragon, who has 7 gold dragons, ancient old gold dragons that serve in its court. One of the things that becomes very apparent when you look at the highest level dragons is that good has it all over evil. Now, Tiamat is a very, very strong opponent. There's no two ways about it. But in a stand-up fight between Tiamat and Bahamut, my money's on Bahamut, I'll tell you that right now. Tiamat is definitely powerful, but not as powerful as you would think, given how iconic it has become in representing the game. Now, once again, this is the original monster manual for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. It's not what Tiamat has evolved into over time, which is an even more dangerous and competent and dragon than it was when it started. But Tiamat is as much a god as a dragon. Rarely comes to the prime material plane. Once in a while to place a dragon, that's what they say in the book, though that really doesn't make a great deal of sense to me. Or, of course, when it's looking after some, say, specific magical treasure, it might be a artifact or something of very, very high value, then it can sometimes be enticed out of the plane of hell where it resides and actually come into the prime material plane. Now, we haven't talked much about planes yet, but honestly, unless Tiamat comes to the prime material plane, you're not very likely to run into it unless you're a fairly high-level character. Now, as a fairly high-level character, you got a chance with Tiamat. If you kill it on its home plane, it's dead. If you kill it on the prime material plane, it's banished back to its home plane, much like a devil or a demon. That has some advantages if you're trying to keep Tiamat around. But honestly, I've seen Tiamat used so often and killed so often, and it doesn't make sense to me. At least in the earlier days of Dungeons & Dragons, it was a very strong opponent, but with the right group, you could definitely handle Tiamat. Certainly that's easier in the prime material plane if it was coming out for whatever reason. But there's only one. There's one Tiamat. It's extraordinarily rare because there is only one, and there'll never be another one. So keep that in mind if you're looking at this from a DM standpoint, that if you really want Tiamat to have involvement in your plots, it's probably best not to leave it in a position where it can get cacked by the party. Having said that, they're still strong to deal with. They're not easy they're no kind of a pushover or anything like that, but because you're limited in the number of spells, because you can only use the breath weapons once a day, and even though you're a super genius and a very, very smart dragon, you have limited physical capabilities. Much more limited, I think, than your primary opponent or your counterpoint would have within the game. Now, I think Tiamat's a really cool creature, or dragon god, or however you want to look at it. And they are wild looking, of course. You've got the 5 heads, one in each flavor, if you will: black, white, green, blue, and red. And all of those colors kind of blend together on its body, eventually getting to the back end of the dragon, which is kind of boring and like brownish and whatnot. But it's kind of a garish looking creature from the front, and one that you're going to have to deal with And remember that with all those heads, it's very difficult to surprise. It's very difficult to sneak up on. It has good magic use, but it doesn't have a lot of innate magic use. It doesn't automatically detect invisible. It doesn't have the ability to polymorph like so many of the higher echelon metallic dragons do. So for me as a DM, I like Tiamat. I gotta be careful how I use it because I think that as a creature, it's fairly vulnerable. You'll take a lot of damage. You may lose some of your party members and so forth, but if you have a decently strong party, yeah, you can mess with Tiamat, I think. So, of course, Tiamat, everybody knows what Tiamat is. I mean, that's a big deal. And when you ask people about, well, what do you think of Tiamat? Okay, from a DM standpoint, I don't think they're the nastiest evil creature out there. I would only give them about a 9, 9.5. I know that players I've spoken to have said pretty much 9.5 to 10. They've certainly found it to be a tough creature to deal with, but I think that there's other evil creatures and other strong creatures, not necessarily all from 1E, that are more than a match or certainly are able to outstrip what somebody like Tiamat can do. I'd be more afraid of a beholder than I would be of Tiamat. And of course, Tiamat, being in charge of all the evil creatures, is as evil as they get. So, from our side as a DM, like I said, I would give it a 9.5. Most everybody I spoke to said either a 9 or a 10 or somewhere in between. A lot of 10s. And certainly from the player side, even more 10s. I'm not sure if that's really based on practical experience or expectation. But try it and see. Just remember that it's extremely rare. You would run into Tiamat with the same amount of frequency that you would run into somebody like, say, Loki or, I don't know, Mordenkainen or something like that. It would be very, 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 very rare. So that's Tiamat. And it's certainly one that you need to be respectful of, but also understand that if you're a good player and you have a decent amount of reasonable level characters in your party, and I'm not talking about 20th level or anything, you can get Tiamat with 10 to 12th level characters. You got a party of 5 or 6 people like that, I think they can handle Tiamat. But give it a whirl. Just remember, there's only the one. There can be only one. Have fun, everybody. Hope you found this enjoyable. If you did, please give us a like. Questions? Leave us a comment. Share with your friends. Consider subscribing, because we really love to have you here. Take care, everybody, and remember, dwarves rock!